Alright, so today we're going to be talking about authority versus society. So the original idea that we had was to talk about police brutality. It's because that's like a big issue that's going on right now. Well, I mean that's seen by like the media and by people in general. And then we went on because I mean that definitely when being presented could create a lot of binaries. And so then we went on to talk, or I'm just thinking about, the election that's happening. There's a lot of distrust that's going on, with both of the candidates. So then we thought, why not talk about, distrust among the public? So today we're going to be talking about how much, why society's distrust in government has increased due to 4 major events over the past 56 years. And we got the 56 years from a chart that we found online that shows 4 significant drops in distrust. It starts with the Vietnam War and then goes on to the Watergate scandal, to economic decline in the early 1990s, and to war on terror after 9/11. So seeing this chart, you can see that there are four dramatic. That's a laser pointer. So right here, you see one big drop, and we found 2 events that happened within this time period right here, between 1970 and 1980. That contributes to that drop. And there's another drop right here, and then another drop right here. And so what we did whenever finding what like specifically was happening was we searched events in that time era and exactly what could have contributed to those drops. So here's the timeline. So Vietnam War was from 1954 to 1975. The Watergate scandal was in 72. Economic decline between 1990 and 1995. That was a recession that happened whenever President Bush was in term, and then war on terror after 2001 whenever 9/11 struck. So the first one we're going to talk about is in 1972, which is the Vietnam War. So this definitely made us question the power the government had, because not only did it cause 58,000 casualties among U.S. soldiers, but also caused 3 million casualties among civilians in Vietnam. This definitely showed the public what kind of power that the government had in that they had no remorse for the people of another nation. And you can see in this newspaper headline, it says, "If the government won't stop the war, the people must stop the government." This definitely shows a lot of what the public was thinking, because they're back home thinking about their family, about how many of their family members are going into this war and dying just because the U.S. won't surrender to the other nation, which definitely resulted in a loss in the war. It went against U.S. morals. 43% from a Gallup poll believe that the war was fundamentally wrong and immoral. In this picture, you can see that he's kind of like a puppet. The U.S. is the what do you call it?
Puppeteer.
Yes, the puppeteer, and then there's the Viet Congs on that. No. Yeah, the Saigon puppet. So I mean, it just kind of showed what the public was thinking during this time. Then we're going to talk about the Watergate scandal. That happens right here, this second drop. And the Watergate scandal was whenever President Nixon was in term. There were five people that went into the Watergate building and stole a bunch of confidential documents. And Nixon was trying to cover up for these people, and so people started to believe that he was the one who was behind these robberies, and this raised distrust, and this caused people to go against Nixon, and even his own people in office to go against him. He not only tried to cover up for them, but he fired people who were against his thinking, his perception on what had happened. So I mean, this kind of was seen by the public as like, if this is our top guy, then why are we looking at him as the face of this country? He's the one who we can't even trust with our confidentiality and stuff of the nation. And in this newspaper headline, it says Nixon says he won't resign. This is just like, it's seen by the public like is bolded, and it's the, it's the headline of a newspaper, and this is definitely showing that he's seen as a negative aspect on society, or on our government, instead of a positive one, and that is shown in this headline. And then in this chart right here, you see that the trust had decreased over the span of his term, and the increase in distrust, and there was an increase in distrust. And then talking about the third drop.
The third one, this is whenever the time period of the recession that was happening in the 1990s. It lasted about 4 to 5 years roughly, but the major drop that did happen was in the first two beginning of the years. It was one of the largest recessions that we did have in our era, or not our era, but in the history. A lot of higher classes did not agree with it. Because of the recession, what had happened, there was a lot of people losing jobs. Taxes were starting to get higher. Higher class did not appreciate it because the higher class was getting more taxed on than they were in the lower classes. President George Bush was not reelected because of this. He was at term whenever the recession did happen, but because of everything that happened in the recession, a lot of people did not agree with this, so therefore he was not reelected. And that's when President Bill Clinton took over. It basically, right here, was whenever the unemployment rate, as you can see, right in the era when it started to begin, it started to slowly increase, and then about the midterm of the recession is when a lot of people started not having the jobs because of what happened and because of the power of the presidency. As well as you can kind of see from the 1990s, this was whenever between Bush and Clinton, whenever Bush started getting kicked out of office and Clinton was in, and therefore it started slowly to go up from Clinton because of his new policy of the business cycle and restrictive monetary policy.
Okay, and now we're on terror following 9/11. So there's hatred grew. Okay, so I have hatred and a rise in those who think most Muslims were terrorists, and also that Islam was a threat to the world. And then there's more anger and resentment towards the U.S. grew among the nations, resulting in policies on how, after this happened, how suspects would be treated and how access to personal info would be made available for security concerns and so on. And then it also led to debates at all levels on what is considered an attack of liberties and what is reasonable for security. And then we have just the estimated 251,000 civilian deaths from this.
Okay. Sorry I didn't hold up a marker for you. You used 8 minutes.
We used 8 minutes?
Yes.
I was keeping an eye on the clock.
Okay. So you have a lot of time to play with here. Okay. Can you put the slideshow back up for me, just real quick? Claim. I always like to hear it again at the end. What's your claim?
Our claim was that those 4 events were what contributed to distrust
Okay.
among the society to it.
All right. So you are pinning it on events.
On events.
Okay. On specific events. You know what I really appreciate about this, and I didn't know I would, as somebody who is humanities of humanities. I'm sorry, I have to start my time. As somebody who is like humanities of humanities, I really appreciate the clarity of what seems to be a very scientific methodology that you've got here. Like, we always go back to the graphic, and here's the point that we're looking at. There's this overlay of events on a chart. Here are the drops. Here's who's in office. This is the event. So, like, the base of this thing is, like, really, really nice because we've got that descriptive piece in there. You start really strong in Vietnam, and I feel like this sort of weakens as it goes along, because we start really strong with the Vietnam stuff. I would pump up the context of Vietnam. In other words, this idea that even in 9/11, when you get there, that was an attack on us. Vietnam didn't do nothing to us. It was a carryover of a presence from World War II, and it's actually a fascinating history that there is no stoppage between World War II and Vietnam, really, with regard to U.S. military presence and the Pacific theater. But I think the wording may be a little like go for the gut punch. Is it that the citizenry began to question the morals of, I liked this is what kind of mistrust it was. I think that's where your big work is for next time, is critically look at what kind of trust was violated and how was it violated. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's going to give you the real humanities exploration of this thing. I like, again, in Vietnam, you looking at those artifacts. Nixon, you're looking at the artifacts. There's artifacts for each one. Again, I think it gets weaker, both saying what kind of distrust occurred, and it would be neat if it's 4 different kinds. This thing constantly develops until you can make a claim that today there's very little. It's a hard sell to say, hey, trust us. We're your government. You know what I mean? So I feel like the claim is, because it's so scientific, almost observable truth at this point. What's the next layer of it? When you find the next layer of it, right, that we create different kinds of mistrust, that it's harder to bounce back from each one, that only a tragic incident will bounce us back from one. You know what I mean? Go for a more debatable claim, right? But use this same investigative methodology, because it's working. You can show this is where this trust was violated, this is what happened, and then I would say more response artifacts. You have 7 minutes to play with. More, how does that mistrust show up that isn't just a newspaper headline, that isn't so on the nose? How does it show up in subtler ways? How does it show up in our entertainment, our literature, our technologies even? Does that make sense?
Yes.
You got a real solid frame. Now go bigger. Right, go bigger and think about what the consequences are. Because maybe you can prove that mistrust is going down. What are the consequences of that socially? Good?
Yeah.
All right.
I think what kind of holding us back with pushing the time limit is that we are missing one group member, so we don't have the full knowledge of what she was supposed to talk us. So I think
you know what the situation is now. You know what the situation is now. Right, so move forward with that basis, because it's got a real solid foundation.
Thank you.
Cool? All right, thanks guys.